Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bold, Beautiful Borderline podcast. It's your host, Sarah, and I am joined with Leslie, guest co-host. And today we are talking about unattaching from trauma. This is a really interesting episode. It's because I recently had a tarot card reading. I try to do this like once or twice a year, just kind of check in from this fabulous, amazing tarot card reader whose name is Preve, and I'll put their links in the show notes. But one of the things that came up in my reading was, Sarah, you really have to start unattaching from your trauma. It is weighing you down. How do you go from the bridge of shame and attachment to not experiencing shame, shamelessness, and unattaching from that trauma? And that really sat with me because I was like, what the fuck does this even look like? How do I do this? And so naturally, of course, I had to podcast about it. So this is what Leslie and I are talking about today, and I hope it resonates with you.
Having this allegiance to a sort of identity as a traumatized person or a victim of trauma, one of the biggest things for me is it blinds me to where I can do damage. It blinds me to where I can cause harm. And so if I am always the victim in every situation, then when I am maybe like lashing out verbally, or, I'm like super dysregulated, and so I'm just like having really intense affect, I feel totally justified in saying what I'm saying. Like, yes, this may be hurtful, but I have this well of trauma inside me, and that means that I get to be hurtful, if I'm feeling this activated. And so that's a big piece for me that's just been coming up lately at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's almost like because mine is bigger than yours, then it gets to take up more space than yours. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And like I think that when this is true of any aspect of your personality, whether it's your trauma history or your gender, or like race, or like when that is like the closer that identity is to how you create your sense of self, the more you're going to protect it and armor it, obviously, and the more threatening it's going to be when somebody comes after it. So for me, like the only way that I was really able to realize what I was doing was by being called out on it, obviously, right? Like, and that often happens when we're fighting, where it's like, all right, you want to like, let's go. Like, let me tell you your shit, and but it wasn't, how do I say, it's weird because this didn't, like, again, like it didn't necessarily come from a place of love. It wasn't somebody like sitting me down and gently being like, hey, when we get into conflict, you're doing this thing. And it was, I was in the conflict, and like I am somebody who, like, I will sort of own my shit in like, even if somebody else is not owning theirs, even if somebody is going to use that against me, like I'm still going to own up to like, hey, this is my side of things, this is what I can see myself doing. It's hard when the other person doesn't pick up their side of that and say like, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is what, like, and that was the sort of subtle assumption that I had during conflict for a really long time, that like, well, if I'm owning my stuff, then like, the other person they have to, like own theirs. So it was hard because this person was calling me out as a way of avoiding accountability for their own stuff. Regardless, it really tore the veil off my eyes, and I was like, oh shit, you're still being an asshole, but you are not wrong.
Yeah, there's my trauma showing up. Yeah. What's interesting is when I was thinking about how to unattach from trauma, or like why unattaching from trauma is beneficial, I was just thinking about it from the perspective of it's beneficial for me because I'll hurt less. And then, of course, Leslie has to come in and be like, I'll do less damage to other people. I'm like, this fucking jerk right now.
That's because I dissociated so much through my childhood. I literally lost my sense of self.
I mean, yeah, that is an indicator though, right? When you're prioritizing the health of other people over your own. And where's the fine line between doing both of those things and still not identifying by your trauma.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I don't know. That's why we're having this conversation, right? Is to like try to find some nugget of wisdom.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and something that just sort of came up for me as you were saying that a lot of like my sort of like secondary trauma or like the sort of trauma that came in my 20s came as a result of me not being able to protect myself again because that sort of sense of self and sense of defending myself had been so dissolved between my family and like bullying and peers and like that embracing of a victim sort of consciousness and identity was a way of protecting myself. That was sort of a carte blanche of like, okay, you can like you can tell me that like my emotions are too intense and you can tell me that I'm jumping to conclusions and you can tell me that I'm filling in details, and like whatever else you want to say, but like you cannot say that horrible shit did not happen to me. I know that especially in relationships where somebody knows your trauma history. And so that is, I think, is one way in which I really held on to that identity of being like a trauma survivor. And a big part of moving through that now as I sort of growing out of that like sort of mindset, that trauma brain does to us where like I can't see a future. I can't plan for a future. I'm getting through every day. I'm in survival mode. And so getting a little bit of stability, creating a little bit of stability for myself has given me the opportunity to visualize myself as somebody who has skills, as somebody who has more life experience. It's kind of like the percentage of my life that was traumatic, like is it gets smaller the longer I'm alive and the more that I learn to protect myself and to like have effective boundaries but also effective vulnerability as well. Like I things that once maybe were more traumatizing become less easily traumatizing as I get older, and that has helped loosen my grip on that identity as well.
Yeah, and that shift is so interesting because the things that were objectively traumatizing and should still feel traumatizing don't feel traumatizing the same way that they once did. Like, I couldn't even use the word rape in my early 20s, in my like late teens and early 20s. And now I can just toss that word around like it's nothing. Arguably because so many people have been raped too that it like almost steals the intensity of the word because it's no longer just my experience that was hidden in the shadows. It's like the experience of every female identified person that I know in some way, or not, like in some type of experience, whether we call that rape or not call that rape, but like every female identified, assigned female at birth person I know has experienced that. So it's not as traumatizing to the point that you would think it would be because we're just exposed to it so much.
Totally. I really like the way you also talk about like the other piece I think about sort of identifying with any community, regardless of whether it's like being a victim of trauma or whatnot, is again, like it gives you access to community.
Mhm.
Like, and for like whether that access is embedded in the context of like a moment of real pain, because you're feeling triggered or whatnot, like that is still access to this community of people who have been through something similar as you. And especially trauma survivors in particular typically end up marginalized and ostracized, in other social environments. So I think that, like, especially as borderlines, like, we've got to be careful that we don't do the all or nothing, like the throw the baby out with the bathwater, like, it's okay to identify as a trauma survivor or even a trauma victim, like there's a lot of sort of dancing around what terminology to use or whatever. If you identify as a trauma victim, you identify as a trauma victim. And I think that also another piece of this that's really hard is that like so many of us, like the way that our loved ones encouraged us to move on was by sweeping it under the rug. You're okay, shake it off, just keep moving, just keep going, especially if you were involved in like sports or, certain other extracurriculars, that totally bleeds out into other areas of life, obviously. That is often like very much the attitude, with trauma survivors. And people are doing it from like a really good place. I think they really want to help. But like when you live in a larger sort of cultural context of utter denial of the length and breadth of trauma that goes on, particularly to women and female identified, like femmes, just for lack of a better term, I like just referring to, although yeah, nothing's perfect. Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say.
I do.
When you're experiencing trauma in the larger cultural context of like this denial of how severe and pervasive it is in our society, holding on to what happened to you, I mean, it can feel like you are the only person who is really holding on to this, and like, if you are not going to get justice through any sort of official channels, if you're not even going to get justice through unofficial social, networks, it can feel like letting go of what happened to you is just giving the universe carte blanche, for it. And that, like that's fucking heavy.
Mm-hmm. Well, and for me, one of the things that I think about is like the act of letting go is like sitting with the sadness so much that like the sadness feels like it'll kill me. So it's so much easier to just attach to, especially the fucking humor that is trauma. Like for me, there's so much humor that I attach to trauma as a survival mechanism for so long that if I lose that, then I lose a sense of who I am. And then I'm just stuck with this like sad blob of Sarah. How long will that blob last?
Yeah.
Like, do I know myself in that environment? Like, no, that's why we're talking about this, because like if I unattach from the trauma, like I don't know that version of me.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
know this version of me that started being traumatized so very young before I was even able to develop a sense of self.
Yeah.
So who is Sarah in her 30s without lugging that backpack around, I don't know.
Right. And I think it's kind of a similar process to like I don't know if this happened to you when you were a kid, but like I kind of like had a moment where I just like got up one day and I was just like I am drowning in like all of these plastic toys that like I don't play with. Now, I was not like wealthy or affluent or whatever. These are thrifted, whatever. Many people in my family have like kind of borderline hoarding issues, like so I was just like, but I just like, and I was just like, I don't play with these anymore. I don't feel like a kid anymore. It doesn't feel appropriate for me to be playing like this. The police have busted into this room, on multiple occasions, like in the middle of the night, because like my mom was having an episode, like this is not a safe place for play. And so like I really got rid of like just tons of stuff. I mean, I really like I purged my childhood, and I can't have been more than like 8 or 9. There's no way I was older than like 8 when I did this. And so, I mean, I do think that there's like a degree of that we have to do with our trauma, where it's like we come out of like childhood or adolescence or whatnot. And it's like this massive backpacking 7-day trip, like even the dogs got, packed up high, like, and we have to go through and we have to choose. We get agency and ownership over our narrative. We have to choose what we want to take with us. And that's really hard to do if you are still, if you haven't like embodied a lot of those experiences and like processed through what happened to you, not just in like a narrative way, but in like a really visceral way. And so I think that that's also something that's happening possibly for both of us. And tell me if I sound wrong here, that like we both intellectually have processed a lot of that trauma. But once you get through that process of intellectualizing or just, narrativizing your trauma, like you have to feel all of the feelings that you were not, that your body is literally bracing, that your muscles are bracing against, like eventually that brace loosens and you physically have to feel that stuff. And so for me, it's felt like I'm like, fuck, like, am I doomed? Is this just, I'm getting worse, like, and I really do think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's like kind of cliche, I feel at this point. Like I'm finally at a point of relative stability where I can actually feel that stuff. And the sign of like processing, I think, versus maybe like ruminating or intellectualizing or whatnot, is after I like process something, I feel drained, I feel tired because sobbing, is exhausting, but I feel like a clarity. It's like the air after it rains, like there's something has I do feel this sense of like something has been cleared. And God, it's been like a year at least of this for me now, of like choosing to take out a lot of stuff from my life, that wasn't helping me along this sort of process. And so it's been a year of that. And like I do finally feel like the anger, the rage, the sort of hair trigger with my nervous system sort of starting to recede and fade. And part of that has been deciding, yeah, what I want to take with me and what I need to process and leave behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that you're right about the body being sort of the last to go. And like when I think about the various traumas in my life, and there's some that I feel like I've completely, yeah, processed through and even like like if I think about rape, for example, like I feel like totally empowered in my sense of sexual identity and my relationship with my body in that regard. And I don't feel the need to cover up or hide or even to not talk about, like, I feel very confident in that. It's not to say I don't step out into the world and am very aware of like men being around me, but we have to be like that regardless of if we've been sexually assaulted or not. But then I think about like the family trauma
Mm,
and especially the trauma that I carry through my mom and her experiences. And that's the piece where I think unattaching from that, what is that even like?
mm,
How do you feel that and not have any, what is the word? Like, I don't have anyone to look to that I've seen that has done that, So it's like blazing your own trail, but you're carrying generations of women's trauma on this trail that you're blazing, and you don't have anyone holding your hand.
yeah. That is a huge like wound that I have been confronting lately too. This lack of mentors in my life, this lack of older women and femmes who, like you say, have been through something similar, sort of a similar trauma history, who are then, again, like this is sort of what I was talking about, where I'm finally starting to visualize, like, okay, what does Leslie look like post, like what does that actually look like to get older and to be somebody who is skilled and who is resourced enough to maybe not fix everything, but at least cope with it. you know, some people are doing some really cool work on that. I work with a woman who does rites of passage for adult women. And so this is it's like a year-long program, and then at the end of it, you go through an initiation where you take a solo trip into the backcountry. They obviously it's you're safe, but that has been a really useful sort of frame of reference for me to think about this in, and that we are people who have sort of, like a lot of people phrase it as, like walking through fire, like being through trauma, being through rape, being through complex trauma, like a lot of people sort of conceptualize it that way. And we are like actively denied those rites of passage in our culture. Like, there's no sort of there's not even a rite of passage for your first menses, like we don't even do that shit anymore. depending on who you are, you might be super grateful, that we don't do that kind of stuff anymore. I think that it's extremely powerful. And I think that you and I and a lot of other women in our 30s are like crying out for an initiation into our not necessarily mother of children phase, but that sort of like we are graduating into this phase where we are becoming nurturers and we are creating our communities and we are creating these spaces. I think that we are going to have to create a lot of those rituals for ourselves. Where there's like a lot of meaning making that we're going to have to engage in because yeah, we don't have, for me, I know like at least in my family, most of my elders died very young. One of my grandmothers died when she was 31, 32. The other one, she passed when she was 64. So like I only have one sort of elder female relative I can think of that is still around. And her and I have pretty pretty different politics. And so, this is the other thing too. We also just like don't we're not embedded in communities where like we have people who have intimate knowledge of what we're going through. It's hard to initiate someone when you are not sort of with them through the different sort of struggles, and the sort of moral or philosophical sort of questions that they're wrestling with. So part of the program that I was talking about the woman I work with, that part of that is like I think it's like weekly meetings, where you talk about it's kind of like a combo of like therapy. I believe they have like a licensed therapist who also works and has developed the program. And so we just like, even my closest friends, even the people I love the most, like by virtue of the way we live our lives, like they do not know a lot of the stuff that I, like they might know that like I'm in a situationship and I'm struggling with setting boundaries with myself about, X, Y, and Z or whatever. But they're not privy to like me, having these like sobbing, crying episodes, because I'm so overwhelmed by emotions and by like my lack of answers. And there's an intimacy that we don't have that I think that's one reason why a lot of people are now wanting to like create community and have, it's not just that people want friends, they want people who are living their lives in tandem with each other. And I think especially for people with trauma, it's really important to have people like that in your life to mirror back the self of that they see of you, and they know your trauma history, sure, right, if they're close enough, but they have the benefit of it, like there's a way in which it doesn't define you if you're in community with the right folks, and so that can be really dangerous if you end up in community with not the wrong folks, but like folks who like don't have capacity to hold you where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah. As we talk about this, I'm realizing that that is one of the ways in which I have practiced unattaching from my trauma is like the willingness to create friendship because and especially like I know I'm such a fucking broken record, but like I had to get sober before I could do that because I could
Yes.
never have the friends that I needed to. I couldn't bring any of the friends that I was drinking with me.
If other people are self-medicating, then that's what they're going to keep on. If nothing changes, nothing changes, and it's not a ding on them. They've got their own stuff and they're dealing with whatever, but sometimes they can't come with you.
Yeah, no, and those people could not. And so like allowing myself to make friendships like with my friends Edwin and Leanna, with you, like with I can't even think of anyone else's names.
I know what you mean. I'm
But
like, oh, the gang's all here.
yep, exactly. But like having people in my life where I'm not like using, oh fuck, having people in my life where I'm not like just using my humor and the jokes about it to mask
Yeah.
it all. Like
Yeah.
having those people around is so healing. in
Yes.
a way that I didn't know that it could be.
Totally. Well, because humor, I mean, there's nothing wrong with using humor as a coping mechanism for your trauma, but humor is a caretaking mechanism.
Yeah.
Humor is a way of saying, I don't think that these people can handle the full weight of what I need to tell them, and I still need to feel seen. And the only way I can feel safe that I'm not going to upset them, but still feel a degree of seen is if I use humor. Yeah. And it's heavy. I notice that when I'm spending time with certain people, and I'll get kind of dysregulated, and I'll be like, I don't want to be seen this close. I don't want to be seen this closely. This is me. That's what's making me uncomfortable. And so I wonder if sometimes that's, like presenting your trauma without the humor. It just feels like I'm too seen.
Yeah, and I think for me too, it was also just like it makes people too uncomfortable
Yes.
to sit with your, like I really like to joke about how like I've had three uncles kill themselves. Like statistically speaking, we're working on another, like
Yeah.
and, and like but
And
I
I
mean
think
like
that's funny.
how do you it is funny. It's
Yeah.
it's funny because like the alternative to it being funny is recognizing that like 45% of my mom's sibling sets
Yeah.
have ended their lives.
Yeah.
And if we look at that, then it's like the myriad of reasons behind that all of these people that you love lived through to make that decision. And
Yeah.
then to have like my entire, like, I'm 32, so 20 plus years of my life being, why do people live? Like,
Yeah.
how do you talk to a 12-year-old or an 11-year-old about the purpose of life and the reason that they should keep living it? People don't want to talk to you about that, Leslie. Like, that's
I know.
like, it's so awkward. So it's
Yeah.
easier to just laugh about it.
I know. I know. Well, and like, people can only meet you sort of as far as they've met themselves. And this is again, I think another reason why when we get sober, or, when we get, California sober or whatever you want to,
You were sober the whole time you were here, right? Leslie
Oh
came to
God, yeah.
visit.
I can go large stretches without,
Yeah.
I do start to experience physical symptoms.
Yeah.
And I honestly, Sarah, I genuinely think that like there is something about, I wouldn't be surprised if there was something with cannabinoids acting on our oxytocin system. There's something about the cannabinoids are there to replace my lack of a social support network, because when I am well resourced with like people who care about me and want to spend time with me and can hold everything that I'm bringing forward within reason, like I don't get depressed. Like I
Yeah.
just, it's so obvious to me that like I would not be a depressed person if I lived in community with people who, cared about me. And so it's really interesting to me because a lot of times, like, there's a lot of other theories about why folks smoke, but that one isn't really looked at a ton, And so
Yeah.
I'm very curious about whether or not it works on your oxytocin system or not with
You
like
should
bonding.
connect with Berkeley about this.
I know.
Yeah, you should do some research about this. I mean, you have plenty of people in California to pull from. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we have plenty of people using marijuana everywhere to pull from these days, but
Yeah.
still.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, I didn't mean to totally derail
no, that's okay.
the reasons why like we can't sort of take some people with us is because yeah, if they are avoiding their own feelings, like then they're going to avoid your feelings, not through any malice every time necessarily, but just like if you think about like our sort of like our self-preservation, that's like one of our strongest instincts, right? Like keeping ourselves alive. And so like I just think that that sort of like if avoiding your feelings is part of how you get through every day, not because you're trying to do it, but just because you're busy and you have a bunch of people making demands on you and life is stressful and there's a horrific current event thrown at you every 5 minutes, then like as much as you might have like the intellectual cognitive empathy with someone, like accessing that affective empathy, If it comes up against you keeping the lid on everything you've been keeping a lid on, the lid is gonna stay on, and your system is gonna find some other way to get through that interaction, usually by encouraging the other person to do the same thing that you're doing. And so yeah, I have found myself in that situation too. And I don't know. I guess like my social paranoia can be bad, and so I am just constant. My sort of inclination is always to try and find where people are trying to be good, But I think that like the way the human brain has evolved, like modern living has really sort of short circuited a lot of that ancient wiring. And there are people who have used that to very bad ends.
Sure.
And it has really material effects on the way that we have relationships with ourselves and with others.
Yeah. Yeah. As I'm hearing you talk, it's like the answer is opposite
Destroy
action.
society and create new villages.
I mean, yes, absolutely. But like the more tangible
Yeah, yeah,
option
yeah.
for
The
us
intermediate step.
is absolutely the opposite action of going towards trying to build community. Like, and I've been doing that in a very, very small way, and it's been really profound. And for you, I hope it means like finding a city or a town where you'll be able to do that. I know that you don't feel like you can do that where you're at, right? Especially because of like the high status bullshit that you deal with living where you live.
Yeah, it's it's been a good process though of like letting, I know it's like really really cliche, but like I think that I will be better able to foster community having gone through some of the sort of adult bullying or gossiping, or for lack of a better word or whatever you want to call it. I I have really come to view that process as, and this ties back into releasing the identity of a traumatized person, that I really held on to. Like it's like it's silly or whatever, but like I don't want to be friends with people who would treat me like that anyway. And so I think that the reason why I wasn't finding community is in part because like I might just be like kind of a misfit wherever I go, but also because I was not clocking people who didn't want to be in community with me in the first place. And all of my energy was going into these people who had a vested interest in keeping me at the bottom of the sort of social order no matter what. Like the thing that's really set me free from that pattern, to be perfectly honest, is just like mourning and grieving and just like literally being like, I am so sorry, little Leslie, that this is what you think is love, that this is what you think is belonging, that this is the way you think people should treat you. Just really looking at like, you don't deserve that. That is sad that this is your stand, not in like a pitying or a shaming or an angry, but just in like, just I am so sorry that that is the reality that you live in, and I'm here to take you and bring you somewhere nicer, kinder. And that has been a really powerful tool for me, to just recognize, it's like you can't see something until you see it, like nothing can be addressed or like nothing can be changed that isn't addressed. So just like being really painfully honest with myself about like, what are your how are you surviving in these environments that are not good for you, in that respect, a lot of the work that I thought I had to do looks very different in my 30s. It's very, very different work.
And it's supposed to be different.
Yeah, right. We're getting older. We're changing. We're
Yeah.
growing. Yeah.
I can only imagine what the conversation will be like in our 40s.
I can't wait. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I hope we're
I
still
think,
having it.
yes. Yeah. No, you know, I think that one of the things, like one of the whys for this podcast, I mean, one of the whys for, me, certainly for why I keep coming back is like, I mean, you're like the number one podcast on Borderline
Oh,
on
I don't
like
know if that's
several
still true.
platforms.
I don't know if that's still true anymore. I have no
I mean,
idea.
okay, you're number two. Okay. Like,
Well,
but
it matters. We can just say that. It matters.
yeah, no, it does. And it, because we are probably not going back to living in villages of 50 people where everybody intimately knows each other, like we need and the online community to be that village in some ways. Like, it would be great to have an elder that I can physically meet with every week. But in lieu of that, because that's not the world we live in right now, I think it's absolutely fucking amazing that I can go to the pod and like look for a topic and be like, hey, shame, this is something I've been struggling with, and listen to an episode and get, maybe not an ultimate blueprint, but at least a slice of like, other people are dealing with this. This is how they're coping with it. This is how they're thriving.
Yeah.
I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. And I've been sitting with do I even still want to do this podcast? Because it's been 5 years. There's been 250 plus episodes.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's so much work.
Yeah. Dude, people have no idea. It's a lot.
But every time I talk to somebody new, I feel that little Sarah, like you're talking about, the little Leslie, connect with this new person and this new person's experience. And that, like, yeah, in lieu of having an 80-year-old gay neighbor, which is like really, I would love to have like an 80-year-old lesbian neighbor.
Yes.
I have you guys, and we have each other, and that's so powerful.
And maybe we try to bring more elder borderlines on the pod, Maybe that's a thing
I would love to find them. I don't know
exactly. Yeah.
Where are you? I know you're out there.
refer your BPD hottie grannies.
Yes. We want your hot grandma borderlines.
Yes.
Yeah. Unattaching from trauma, my friend. We certainly have ideas. No blueprint.
Yeah, lots of ideas.
Lots of ideas, no blueprint, but I know this conversation is going to land for a lot of people.
Yeah, I hope so. And I always really love it when we get questions from folks too, of if there's anything sort of specific that folks are really working on or whatnot.
No, I love to know what people are thinking and what they're wondering and what they're struggling with. I think like it's so easy to have my own agenda because my agenda is from a 30-year-old queer professional
rural,
yeah, like that lens. And then it's just fun.
There's 256 different combinations of the 9 different, like there's so many different flavors. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Leslie, I just love you. Thank you so much for joining this episode of the podcast.
I love you too. Anytime.
Hi, listeners. Thank you for tuning in to the Bold, Beautiful Borderline podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your content. That is super helpful for me. It helps us find additional folks who want to listen to the show, want to feel seen, family members who want to learn, and partners who want to understand. If you want to follow along to more than just the podcast, find us on Instagram at Bold Beautiful Borderline, find me at Borderline from Hell, or head over to boldbeautifulborderline.com where there's information, resources, a place to leave a voicemail to be heard on the podcast, which I love, and just general content. All of that information can be found in the show notes. And if you want to get exclusive content, which is bonus episodes, journal prompts, worksheets, all sorts of extra stuff, sometimes videos of me with my hair very crazy with kind of impulsive borderline rants, head over to Patreon and consider becoming a member. That is super helpful with creating content that allows me to destigmatize BPD and all of the other wild mental health struggles that we discuss on the podcast. A huge thanks to everyone who joins on the podcast to share their story and just generally helps keep this thing alive. Especially my friend Corey Evans from the Evergreen Band. He produced and created the music that is the intro and outro for this show, as well as the cover art that was created by my husband, Talon Abbott. Their information is found in the show notes. All of the information discussed in the podcast is purely personal experience. This is not medical recommendations. This is not therapy recommendations. There's no producer for this show. It's all me.